Hello. I still got my headphones on. I can't actually use those because, well, if you were here, you'd understand. But hello, welcome to the Midweek Blessing. It is, well, it's almost Wednesday evening here. The sun is kind of still up. If you want a weather forecast, we got some good old-fashioned English drizzle going on out there. But inside, it's the middle of the week, so we're coming together for a middle of the week blessing, a midweek blessing. And tonight it is Timothy. Timothy was somebody that Paul put his heart and soul into. I think that Paul was kind of leaving the reins of his ministry to Timothy. And we get even more of that next week in Second Timothy. But he wants him to know some things, which means this book is not written to a church. This is not for everybody, even though a lot of people like some things that are in this book and like to draw on very, very specific things, which brings me back to last week when we were at Second Thessalonians. Paul wrote Second Thessalonians because some of the things he said in the first letter weren't taken, I think, the way Paul intended. I have a feeling if Paul was back here today, he'd write another Timothy, write a few other letters, because we've taken some of his comments and we've sort of really elevated them to like the most important thing in the church. And I don't think Paul would have had it that way. He says what's important in church. He starts off the letters this way, but we like the end bits, the do's and the don'ts, and the bits that you better do or else. We as people like the ones we can keep and just try and explain away the ones that we can't. So tonight we move on to Timothy. It's just a little bit different. It is to a person, but having said that, if I could lean into our overview here, it might be written to a person, but it's in the Bible and we have it and we get to read it. So it's not written to a church, but to a person, but it's also written to us, especially perhaps the leaders. Now, quite often when I was pastoring, we came to the time where we'd choose our leaders in the church. I'd go up to somebody and says, your church would like you to consider being an elder, a spiritual leader and guide of this congregation. And some people kind of felt the same thing that the choosing committee felt, and they kind of knew this was coming and had already done the process in their mind, and that went quite smoothly. To others, it's like, whoa, what does that mean? What do I have to do? What are the qualifications of an elder? And as soon as they're like, oh, no, that's not going to go well, because I'm going to give them the book of Titus, chapter 1, and I'm going to give them the book of 1 Timothy, chapter 3, and they're going to read it and go, I cannot live up to that. And none of us can. We fall short somewhere on this. And if someone reads that list and thinks, oh yeah, that's me, that's not usually the kind of leader we all want and will enjoy in our spiritual congregation. So there's a little bit of an ebb and flow. This last Sabbath when I was at church, we were talking about how religious leaders relate to their families and their children. And we were reading First Titus, and I was sitting there going, boy, I'm glad this isn't a chapter 3. And then, of course, we move over to First Timothy chapter 3 and read the exact same stuff. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to be doing that this week. And it just felt heavier than I thought it was going to. And somebody, just two people down from me, was like, if I go to number 3 here on our list of overview, he says, these are indicators of probably the kind of person that you're looking for. They may not check the list off completely, but you know when you see who should be a pastor, a shepherd, an elder, an overseer. You know it. And even if they don't measure up on some of these standards, their heart is in the right place. And they have perhaps dealt with some of these things that they're not great on this list. And they've dealt with it with God. They're still living it out. If you have an issue in life, it's hard to talk to someone who's never had any problems, because they don't really get what you're going through, understand that tension that we have in our lives when we try and be something, but we know that we're not. So these are our indicators. The church that I was pastoring in, the denomination has a church manual which spells out all the things that pastor, elders, churches, committees should and shouldn't do. And I was quite loose with those things, because not everything fit every situation. And I would just be like, well, let's do our best. But when there was conflict and there was argument, we had to have a baseline and somewhere that we could sort of springboard off. And then I would often go to the church manual at that point to sort of help us get on a similar page, so that we could sort some things out together. And Timothy here is kind of the manual for that. Paul is letting this young man, this boy in Paul's eyes, I think, going, you know what, you're going to have to choose some leaders of churches, and you're going to want to choose some people that aren't the right people. A little bit like Samuel going to find the next king, looking at all the sons of Jesse, going, well, yeah, that guy looks good. No, and God's like, no, not that one. Until Samuel's like, don't you have another son? And then Jesse goes, well, I've got David, but he's a young kid looking after sheep out in the field. And Samuel's like, yeah, go get him. And this is Paul's version of that to Timothy. You're going to have to choose some leaders when you move from one place to the next, and you leave that into the hands of somebody else. I've certainly done this in ministry a number of times. Here are some guidelines for that. But I'm someone who thinks you're not going to cover them all as an individual. You're not going to find someone who's great at all these things. But we're going to read it tonight. We're going to take a look at that. And that takes me, I've gone out of order here, but to number 2 on our overview list here. There's lots of instructions, but motive is big here. You can have somebody, like I just said, somebody who checks off all these things, but you're just like, no, that's not who we need. We need someone with some scars. They might add something to this right here. So the purpose, 1 Timothy 1:5 says, the purpose of my instruction here is that all believers would be filled with love that comes from a pure heart, a clear conscience, and a genuine faith. So if you're listening to this and you're a leader, I mean, if the algorithm comes up and you're on YouTube and you're like, well, should I be a church leader? And you read this and go, oh boy, no. What are your motives? How's your heart? Paul's like, he wants the church to be okay. I generalize it this way. If you've got a pastor, a minister, a shepherd that has one foot in the church and one foot in the like, hey, I want to be successful in this world and I want everybody to like me, and you can't have one foot in each camp. And I think what Paul's trying to say here gives some tips to try and catch that. And now it happens. I was a pastor for 30 years. There are times where it happened in my own life. That's going to be there. But Paul's like, that's not really who we need leading God's church. So Timothy this first book of Timothy is just helping a young would-be leader of God's church kind of prioritize, check his own heart, give some tips. And we're going to go to chapter 3 of that, which is sort of halfway through the book. It's the rough, well, chapter 2 has some rough parts. I'm kind of glad we're not in number 2. Chapter 2 is something I think Paul would emphasize, make sure we got the emphasis that he was putting there. But that's what we're going to do. And just before I leave the 1 Timothy overview, I just want to talk to you about chapter 4. We're not going to go to chapter 4 tonight, but chapter 4, I think, talks about what we would refer to today as state welfare. Before we had state welfare in the developed world, the church did that role. But either the church has abdicated that role, in some cases it certainly has, or people just don't trust the church, don't want to go near the church. The church has so many other issues. They're not going to go to the church and ask for help because the church is going to be so judgmental that help is just not somewhere you want to go, or they're actually going to have hurt you in some tragic, inappropriate, devastating ways. So the church has kind of let that down. So before we move on, I just want to take this opportunity to go, if you're on the right wing of politics and you think, welfare is just abused, we need to get rid of it. It's just, people, there's so many people on welfare and they're just taking money and they're lazy. You need to read 1 Timothy chapter 4 and substitute widows for welfare and see what happens. Now, when you go there, you're going to be like, yeah, there's some things here for me. And there are. So if you're on the left-leaning side of politics, you have to go read this chapter as well. Because both left and right don't bring an answer to poverty and pain and the things that welfare tries to fix. Welfare can't fix it. Welfare is largely broken because of who we are. And while we live in a sinful world, there are going to be some people that just don't make it and need help. Not because they're lazy. Read the chapter. Some are. But some are. And the chapter's like, deal with that. But while those of us who have, because I'm not pointing fingers here, in this grand scheme of this world, while I might think I have not at the moment, I have. I am blessed. While those of us who have and who are blessed sit in judgment over those who don't, there's going to be a need for someone to fill in those gaps. And at the moment, we call that welfare. And at the moment, the church has largely failed in that role. Not completely. There are some fantastic churches and church people and people of faith doing incredible things. But if you've ummed and ahed on this and you've found yourself fighting and arguing left versus right on this issue, prayerfully and seriously take a look at chapter 4 in Timothy. There's some information for both sides of the discussion. I was very convicted while I read that, both from the left and from the right. The chapter dives into that. So I just thought I'd bring that to us here while we were going for an overview of Timothy. And with that, let's see how we're doing. Cool, we're already 14 minutes in. Let's cruise through the 16 verses here. I'm going to go fairly rapidly. Some of them are awkward. And then we'll go to a couple of questions I'll ask based on these 16 verses as we go through. So I will try and still get us out of here within the 30 minutes. So 1 Timothy chapter 3. I feel like I'm rambling and waffling a little bit tonight. There's a lot here trying to get out. So let's get going. Verse 1. This is a trustworthy saying. If someone aspires to be a church leader, he desires an honorable position. There's something to be gained out of leadership in a church. It's a lot of work. And there's a lot of heart stuff. There's a lot of heaviness that you carry around while you do that work. But there's something to be gained from it as well. And I think it's okay to seek it out. Not in a hierarchical sense of the word, but hey, I want to do something here. I want to make the church a better place. I want people to trust the church again. So I'm not going to give up on it. Instead of walking away, I'm going to become part of the solution. And Paul's like, you're trying to do an honorable thing. Verse 2. So a church leader must be a man whose life is above reproach. Big umbrella right there. We're going to get into some specifics, but that's the big one. He must be faithful to his wife. Now, I've said here all the way along, and I've used a New Living Translation all the way through. And the New Living Translation is a little looser. It's a bit more, it takes into context of modern day, what you'd call a paraphrase. I think all translations are somewhat of a paraphrase. The New Living Translation perhaps more than some others. And here's one where I'm just going to put in the literal one. It actually says he must have one wife. That's the literal translation. But again, what are we saying right here? Should be one wife over the course of his life, one wife at a time? Should it be that he shouldn't be single, he should be married? And people argue this. Trust me, people argue this. But I think to go back to being above reproach is probably a good place to start in that discussion. He must exercise self-control. He must live wisely and have a good reputation, which means sometimes when family stuff breaks down, does the spiritual leader maintain the good reputation? Of course, it's damaged and hurt. We're living in pain in those scenarios. I know some of what I speak here. But does wisdom still prevail? Are we still having a good reputation? Are you still trusted as a spiritual leader? He must enjoy having guests in his home. Can't be aloof. He must be able to teach. Now already there's a wide variety of things right here. He must not be a heavy drinker or be violent. Not be a heavy drinker, so a light drinker is okay. Some churches will be like, no. But we get what Paul is trying to say, right? When you look at this person, do they exude spiritual leadership, or are they off somewhere doing something very different? He must be gentle, not quarrelsome. That's a tough one because a lot of leaders fall in that category. Oh, they can do it with panache and a certain amount of suave by themselves, but they've still got the quarrelsome side. And they must not love money. Again, power and money often are interwoven, and this is a problem in church leadership as well for sure. He must manage his own family well, having children who respect and obey him. Now, this is an interesting one. When you look at that, is there an age limit to that? Does that stop at some point when they move out? Because as someone pointed out in the discussion I was having this last Sabbath at my church, this would exclude God from being a spiritual leader. Because sometimes our children choose to go another way, and we have to be respectful and acknowledge that they become their own person. So there's something in here that we have to be careful how we interpret this and deal with this. But I think verse 5 says it clearly. If a man cannot manage his own household, how can he take care of God's church? There's a management issue right here. Are people safe? Okay, part of the family structure. A church leader must not be a new believer because he might become proud. By the way, it's just offering some advice right there. Someone who is not a new believer can still become proud, and the devil can cause him to fall. That's largely why you don't do these things here, because the devil has a needle in. Verse 7, also, people outside the church must speak well of him so that he will not be disgraced and fall into the devil's trap. And I've got lots of examples swimming around my head right here. You probably do too. You know what that verse is talking about right there. Let's go to verse 8. In the same way, deacons must be well respected and have integrity. Now, for some reason this is coming out here at this moment, but we're talking about lots of little churches in our current world today. Most churches are under 100, and towns have lots of them. So some of the pastors, elders, clergy, deacons are not what Paul was thinking of. And Paul's not talking here about someone who just picks up the offering. But the person who counts the offering should probably have some of this societal respect. But deacons must be well respected and have integrity. So those who are seen in large part by those who are not Christians, not part of our faith walk, must look at our leaders and go, yeah, I can see what they're doing there. They too must not be heavy drinkers or dishonest with money. They must be committed to the mystery of the faith. That's a powerful statement. How many church leaders have no mystery in our faith whatsoever? They have it all down. It's this, and this. Those, we want to be careful in leadership as well. They must be committed to the mystery of faith now revealed and must live with a clear conscience. Now, it's hard to look at someone and say, you don't have a clear conscience. Sometimes you can, but sometimes that's a very internal thing. So this is something that we as spiritual leaders can read. And I believe that as you read this, your conscience, in fact, I think everyone's conscience is going to be pricked here to some degree. You have to sort out who you are, what you're going through, your life circumstance. You've got to sort that out with God. And you're going to have those conversations. And you're going to have peace with that, or he's going to direct you another way. Before they are appointed as deacons, let them be closely examined. If they pass the test, then let them serve as deacons. And the test is somewhat nebulous. You can't just go through this. There are heart issues. And you know it when you see it. Especially if you've got God guiding you, like Samuel with Jesse's sons. In the same way, their wives must also be respected and must not slander others. So in your family, you got to be clean on this. They must exercise self-control and be faithful in everything they do. Again, no one's faithful in everything they do, but it should be something we aspire to. A deacon must be faithful to his wife, and he must manage his children and household well. Those who do well as deacons will be rewarded with respect from others and will have increased confidence in their faith in Jesus Christ. I take this to say that church leadership should help you in your walk, in your faith walk. If it doesn't, perhaps leadership isn't for you. I've always been someone that says that it absolutely has helped me. It's almost kept me on the straight and narrow, so to speak. It can be really good for that, and I love the way Paul has included that right here. And so now, Paul's lent in a little bit with a little bit of heaviness. Now he withdraws and he's like, and I'm writing these things to you now, even though I hope to be with you very soon, so that if I'm delayed, you will know how people must conduct themselves in the house of God. There are ways of doing things that we should aspire to. When we fail to do that, there should be grace and forgiveness and an arm around the shoulder, like, hey, let's try that again. We don't use it to judge someone and say, you're out of here. Godly leaders don't do it that way. There's something else going on inside when you respond that way, when you use power for your own agenda and your own ways of doing it. This is not God working through that. And Paul has, Paul's committed, and Paul is quite a strong leader, I would imagine, but he also has these gentle moments where he remembers why he does what he does. So if I'm delayed, you will know how people must conduct themselves in the household of God. And this is the church of the living God, which is the pillar and the foundation of truth, not a corporation. So many churches have become corporations. Paul is not talking about that. He's talking about us as followers of Jesus. We walk the walk. we go where Jesus went. We do the things Jesus did. This is not a call for corporate behavior. We'll get to that in a second. I'm jumping ahead just a little bit. The last verse. Without question, and Paul's going to summarize this now a little bit about this non-corporation, but the fact that we all focus on Jesus. That's what church is, this pillar. Without question, this is the great mystery of our faith. Christ was revealed in a human body. He was vindicated by the Spirit. He was seen by angels and announced to the nations. He was believed in throughout the world and taken to heaven in glory. So everything we do, if we go back to the first verse we read at the beginning, we do for love, for God's people, because God is who he is. And because of who he is, we can trust him and follow him and know that he will lead us the right way. And we want people who want that to be our leaders, not people who are going to bring the world in and go, this formula, that way, I've got some cleverness going on up here. I can, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the end of the chapter. Now, I'm going to go to a couple questions that I think will summarize the chapter and get the clicking going with us a little bit. Question number 1, questions to ponder. There's some pondering to be done here. Why do you think Paul focuses so much on character rather than skills when describing overseers, elders, pastors, bishops, conference presidents? And what does that tell us about leadership in God's household today? Now, there is a lot of discussion over we need to have someone who can run the church, do a budget, follow HR rules. And these are all important, by the way, but these this is not where the visionary missionary spirit comes from. And we need leaders with visionary missionary spirit, people who want to follow God and do things God's way. I have strong opinions on this. Most church leaders do. I think the pendulum has swung the CEO way far enough. I think it needs to come back to heart, to Jesus, to mission. And I think in large part our church has lost that. Now, there was a time when we just lacked some skills, but it wasn't our lacking of skills that sent the church into a valley of uselessness where we abdicated a lot of what God's called us to do. I don't think it was a lack of skills that did it. I think it was a lack of missionary spirit. I think there's a lot of churches doing the right things, but doing nothing at all. Just checked out. And I've seen a lot of leadership that just has nothing to offer except cleverness and a right PR statement at the right time. No, we have to do better. If we want to be part of what God's called us to do, church has to be better than that. So Paul here focuses on character over a skill set. And I think that's worth paying a little bit of attention to. Process that in your mind. See where you come out on that. Secondly, Paul calls the church the pillar and foundation of truth. That was verse 15. In what practical ways can we as a local church live up to that description? Well, my response to a question like that is, well, we've got to be connected with Jesus, because the church itself is not the pillar and foundation of truth. The church is the pillar and foundation of truth as it is connected to Jesus Christ. So start somewhere around there. I have a feeling time has beaten us. That has gone by very quickly in my mind. So I want to thank you for joining us here, but we won't finish without prayer and without our blessing. So I just invite you just to shut everything out for a minute or so here, and let's just concentrate on connecting directly with God, shall we? Let's pray together. Dear God, our church is a mess. We've neglected to do some important things, and we have put some unimportant things at the center. So I think it's right at this moment, God, to pray for our leaders, even those who have hurt us, and use their power for their own gain. God, lead them, guide them, show them, give them a Damascus Road experience. Paul knows about that. And reveal your will to us so that in whatever leadership role we might have in our congregations, that we will do it according to your will and your ways. Keep us from searching for personal gain at the expense of the group. God, our churches are better with you. Our lives are better with you. Our families are better with you. Help us live that out, God. Help us when we face life alone, when we don't have that church, we don't have that spiritual leaders, we don't have the one that checks in with your ways, your will, your heart. When we find ourselves drifting away from our spiritual community because it has hurt us or abandoned us. Help our churches. Help our leaders. Help our churches, our congregation and leaders be a pillar of truth in our community. Not just doctrinal truth, but the kind of truth that helps people. Bless us, God. Keep us close to your care. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, thanks for joining me here. I feel like that was 5 or 6 minutes, but the clock is telling me that it was considerably more than that. I think this might be one of the longest ones. So without too much more ramble, because I think there's been a fair bit here, I just want to thank you for joining me, being part of this here. Love having you along for the ride, especially those who've been part of my congregations over the years. It's nice to still be in touch this way. But if you're new, say hi. Love to meet you and greet you. But for right now, you've come for a blessing, and I hope a blessing you shall receive. So until next week, here's your blessing.
Oh, mercy me, oh, mercy mine. Down on my knees, I got my arms stretched to the sky. Trouble to the left of me, sorrow to the right. Can you hear me, Lord, and can you lead me to the light? I lift my voice, I call your name, as I toil down in this valley of strife and pain. I've been over backwards, paid it all forwards, don't have a dime to my name, and my debt to you could never be repaid. When the heat wave starts to break and the ice and snow melts away, when the tears we've cried have all run dry and we find the rainbow's end, we'll be walking in the sunshine with him. Don't turn away, Lord, hear my cries. I need you to make up my bed when I die. Forgive me for the trespass. Can't you see I'm running out of time to make it well with my soul by and by? When the heat wave starts to break and the ice and snow melts away, when the tears we've cried have all run dry and we find the rainbow's end, We'll be walking in the sunshine with him. When the heat wave starts to break and the ice and snow melts away, when the tears we've cried have all run dry and we find the rainbow's end, we'll be walking in the sunshine, walking in the sunshine, walking in the sunshine with him. Oh mercy me, oh mercy mine, 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 oh mercy me, oh mercy mine.
People were bracing for the end. Hell is where we're all reaching. This clash is all of our ideals, asking